Welcome to the Ocean of Technology podcast,
where we bring on real experts to talk about
real technology, real deep.
I'm Nate Samuels.
And I'm Joshua Williams.
And we're your hosts.
So I guess we can start it off basically with introductions from everybody. I guess we'll start with Jennetta. Can you give us a little bit of an explanation about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Hey, everyone. My name is Jennetta George. I am a global AI leader at a consulting firm, Slalom. So think of it as like a delivery leader serving clients and leading delivery teams at a consulting firm. And then I also have a few of my own AI-based businesses. I have a freelance business that's really focused around education and enablement called Artificially Intelligent AI. And I'm in the process of building my own app called Candor AI. So hopefully you'll be hearing more about that sometime in the future.
Oh, and one sentence of what AI means to you.
One sentence of what AI means to me. So coming from a consulting background with really focus on enterprise AI, for me, AI means a technology that allows companies or people to unlock a whole bunch of value that they didn't even know that they could get through automation and through prediction. It might not be a standard definition, but it's how I apply it.
Awesome. And by the way, guys, you guys can jump in right after she finished speaking. I don't want to just talk to you guys. This has to be an open discussion. We could all just be talking, and I would like to be a little bit more open. I don't want to just be directing questions at you guys, right?
Sounds good. All right. Well, I can jump in and give a quick background. My name is Adam Judelson. I run a consultancy called First Principles Catalyst, where I work with emerging tech startups to help them build out their products and focus on doing product coaching and fractional product engagements. But I focus primarily on data, AI, space, national security, anything pressing the limits. My background is as head of product at Palantir Technologies for a number of years, focused on Gotham, one of the two big products they sell in the market. And I've run product for a number of other product startups over the years. And I'm pumped to talk with everybody here today. As far as my belief about the definition of AI, I would just say that AI is really the computer doing intelligent things that we didn't directly tell it how to do. And for some people, that's just an analytic. For some people, that's a learning algorithm that gets smarter over time. And sometimes it's just an answer to a question.
Right on. My name is Max Feinglass. I work with Jennetta at Slalom Consulting, and my title is Principal Data Scientist. And I actually kind of get into the Greek letters and help firms and clients go through implementing machine learning and data science type projects around all sorts of different domains. My definition of artificial intelligence is like all about pattern recognition and figuring out the patterns that underlie everyday life in ways that are new and novel that we were never able to understand before.
That's awesome. I love that. So we have another podcast episode coming up about, I want to say it's a week from now, and that has to deal with unstructured data and what do we do with it all? There's all these organizations that collected a bunch of it, and now we have the compute power to be able to start doing things with it. So to kick us off with that, we're talking a lot about ChatGPT. There was, tons of postings over the past few weeks because of all the different applications released as part of the ChatGPT 4, I guess, upgrade, if you want to call it. Jennetta, do you have any specific cases where your clients asked about anything with ChatGPT?
Yeah, I'm sure everyone on this call can relate to this specific ask, but actually a few hours ago, I got an email from one of my biggest clients, CFO for a large finance organization of a large company. And basically he said, hey, I want to present to my team on the powers of ChatGPT and LLMs, large language models. Can you and your team put together some slides and talk us through that? And my response to him was, absolutely. Ironically enough, I'm listening to a podcast right now on ChatGPT, so I got a lot of thoughts on it. However, as an AI consultant, I'm sure you can imagine people have been asking me about this left and right. And usually for most use cases, for most organizations, ChatGPT is the farthest thing away from what they actually want to be implementing in AI to get real value. So how about, this was my suggestion to him, how about we come together and we start off talking about large language models, but then we kind of shift to a more holistic view of AI, talking through actual use cases that could bring your company value. And he was very excited about that. So a lot of times it just takes someone that kind of understands more of the holistic landscape of AI to just bring an organization to the promised land of where AI brings real value.
That's
Yeah,
really awesome. Oh, yeah, you were going to say?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm with Jennetta on this one. It's so fun and it's cool, I think, for people like us. But I think that the number of use cases that it can totally nail right now is actually pretty limited. And I think the way to model it, kind of what I've been commenting lately when I see stuff, is to just remind people that ChatGPT is an amazing innovation, like major kudos to OpenAI, but it is like ultimately at the current level of like a medium intelligent person who could do 10 hours of research on the internet, right? So whoever, if you had your like, least intelligent or medium to bottom intelligent friend and you said, here's 10 hours, go tell me what are the great places to see in Austin, Texas. Is it cool that it produced that answer? That is cool. That does save time. That's a real thing. But for a lot of businesses, the precision and the accuracy of the result matters more, right? So we're seeing it, for example, being used a lot in legal, but the smart people in legal are saying, okay, well, maybe this can help me write the first draft of my memo or be reminded of the places I need to go and actually look for evidence, but I can't actually put this in front of a client directly without doing diligence. So for my part, I think, this is exciting to me, but I think the really exciting part is every single vertical ChatGPT business that's about to be built, just like we had a vertical SaaS business for every single thing, that's about to happen. You're about to get an amazing ChatGPT for legal, an amazing ChatGPT for intelligence analysis, an amazing ChatGPT that is just trained to answer questions for Walmart customer service, right? Like that's what I think is going to be really exciting and when we're going to feel like it's really leapt up even another quantum.
So I find that really funny that you say that because we were previously at the AWS event in Miami, I think last week. And I think I met around 20 different people talking about how they have a startup and it's based off, ChatGPT. And, they're over here trying to pitch to different VCs at the event sometimes. And I thought it was really interesting because you guys are at one side of this the table. You guys are saying, we don't see the use cases as much as it could be. There's medium level intelligence. And then on the other side, there's all these new entrepreneurs coming out thinking that this is the next big thing. We need to invest all our time. We got to jump on the wave right now. We're missing out. So what do you guys think about that?
I think one of the things that people forget is, and I forget there's a stat somewhere out there, but it's something like 95% of the internet is not on the internet. It's not actually accessible to Google. It's all of the private data repositories that large corporations and large government agencies have. ChatGPT has never been trained on any of that information, except in those new vertical startups. And so that's where I think it's going to get really intelligent and really cool, right? Like to make that really practical, think of the legal example. Right now, if you train it on just generic ChatGPT, it's basically like, what did people already write on the open internet about these legal things that you can inform the discussion with? Or you could go to a law firm that specializes in that particular type of case law and go all the way down for 25 years of memos that have been written and make it really intelligent about answering questions about that particular thing. That's the part that excites me.
Yeah, and just bringing that back to like kind of what matters from a base level, because AI is literally nothing without the data. So to your point, Adam, ChatGPT, large language models that are readily available that you have not trained on your business's data, they're not going to be best used for your business. When you start taking those models and applying them inside a business on your data, that's where real transformation starts to happen.
I love that. And by the way, on that legal topic, I believe LexisNexis is already starting to pull in a large language model to start processing that type of legal data. So, I mean, you called it. It's already the ball is getting ready to start rolling. But back to the kind of education piece. So how do we teach executives, students, and like the next generation to think more creatively about the way that they may use their data or the way they may structure a potential model or AI within their organization?
I could try to take a stab at that. I think that the model here is something that I use is so kind of like a little historical in my mind's eye, where I think about like people wringing their hands hundreds of years ago on compiling an encyclopedia and putting all of known knowledge in one place. And what was that going to do? And this is kind of the continuation of that line of thinking. And ChatGPT and all the types of ways that we sort information that even Google uses and knowledge graphs and things like that are fundamentally backwards looking. It's taking all the information that we already have and working with it. There is a much higher value in creating new information and creating new novel ways of seeing things that nobody's ever thought of before. And this kind of creative impulse to update the encyclopedia, to take our knowledge and synthesize it and put things together and produce something that's greater than the existing sum of the parts. That's really going to be encouraged here, where some of the kind of like you're saying your least intelligent friend doing 10 hours of research is not that valuable. And what's really valuable is coming up with something that nobody's ever thought of before. And so I think these technologies are going to funnel us long wave down a much more creative path where there's not going to be much room to do anything other than be more creative and be more insightful and synthesize as opposed to just retrieve.
Yeah, Max, I want to build on that because that's, you know, the premise of what you just said is kind of the way I wanted to address this of, you know, AI in itself is forcing us to be more creative. And when I think about that kind of creativity, I think about just the roles that we as users, as builders, as developers, as whatever title you have, how we're interacting with AI. So, you know, you could pose the threat, AI is taking away jobs, right? That's something that I hear all the time. Instead of just having that mentality of, you know, AI can do X and that's taking away job Y, that's where the creativity starts coming in and start thinking, okay, we don't just need developers for AI. We don't just need people that know how to code to, you know, to give to this practice. We also need AI ethicists. We also need, you know, people that understand bias and can really help create the model holistically as opposed to just looking at the code, the numbers. So it really gives a lot of opportunity for everyone to have a seat at the table when we're developing these technologies. And that's where the creativity really comes in by diversifying the field that's working on the problem set.
So one of the concerns that I kind of have within, you know, diversifying the field within AI is, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but a lot of colleges, a lot of campuses are actually banning their students from using AI for anything, to be honest with you. And it's really concerning because, you know, it brings us back to that time where calculators came out and, you know, there was these mathematicians and these math teachers were walking around protesting saying, don't let our students use calculators. And now it's the same exact thing, but now with AI. And I feel like it's a large struggle that we're going to have right now because as these students graduate, they're not being able to use it and get used to it. And now they have to learn on the field. And then there's companies that are hiring specifically for people who have experience with these AI models.
Yeah,
I think there's a different. Go ahead, Adam.
I was just going to say that, so I was an adjunct professor at Georgetown for a number of years, and you know, you had to put all the papers into like turnmean.com, or I forget what it was called, and its job was to go figure out if students were plagiarizing each other's papers. And I think what everybody's just realizing right now is that because ChatGPT made such a quantum leap forward, at least in the eyes of the public, that like those companies that are going to create the next version that uses, you know, ChatGPT against ChatGPT to figure out who's being the fraudulent person, that just hasn't evolved yet, but it's coming. And the tidal wave of those reactions are going to be right on the coattails of everything that's happening right now.
This is also true with deep fakes, and that the nature of the generation of a deep fake means that you have this arms race where you pit what's real versus what's fake model against each other and run it up, and you have this kind of arms race where by definition you'll always have an ability to detect a deep fake. It's just gonna be like computationally expensive, and it's not like a panacea solution, but it's definitely something that is like mathematically out there.
I would say this though, like we shouldn't underestimate the amount of pain and struggle that will be created for some subset of the population during the transition. Like that's very real, and I'm not trying to discount that. In every transition, there's the pain. Think of like, I love your example there, but think of World War I and sending people out of the trenches before we had tanks to protect people in between the trenches. That was terrible for that set of people that fought those wars for us, right? And so like the transition is the suckiest part, but I do want to set the listeners' eyes on what happens in the long term is that it will be a cat and mouse game, and both sides will evolve. And I think taking it away from students is just it's just silly. Like that's one of those things where that policy lasts for like 3 months or 6 months or maybe a year until everybody realizes that you just can't keep up with that kind of a regulation.
I do think it's worth noting that it's like a sign of the revolution, and that people are really grappling with it and trying to figure out like what to do because it's such an impactful tool. And that like all other revolutionary tools that have happened and come technologies like steam power or whatever has come through, like we've picked some time to figure it out, but we will get to some balance. This isn't gonna like make it so people don't know how to write or something like that. It's not of that order of a challenge.
I really love the innovation that is kind of driving right now within, the populace. I don't know if you guys have seen, but, the amount of VCs, the amount of, new companies starting just off the fact that ChatGPT came out, right? And I don't want to focus on ChatGPT at all, to be honest with you guys. But it's just crazy to me seeing how many more people are, becoming more innovative than they ever thought they were, right? And they're just, yeah. Were you gonna say?
Oh, sorry. I'm trying to find this post that I saw because you were talking about the subset of population. One of our potential clients has a portfolio company. Okay, yeah. So the portfolio company services another company. It's Anthony's coal-fired pizza. And basically what they did was they put a human chatbot on the phone. So now when you call Anthony's coal-fired pizza, it literally sounds like a human's answering it. And like it has a conversation with you. I thought that was absolutely insane. So that takes that subset of population that was answering those calls gone,
Well, they're not gone, I think is the argument. They're still there.
Yeah.
We got to find useful things for everybody to do.
Yeah, and I was also going to say there in a lot of these larger restaurant companies, I guess you could say, them actually answering the phone can make them lose business sometimes. I'm not going to lie to you because you're cutting down one service use and giving it to another time or another use, right? So for an example, that person could maybe be better off taking customers at the front, maybe better off making the pizza, better off doing something else that could actually help drive the company to make more revenue than just answering that phone in that moment. And maybe that's just a use case that company is using to actually increase their revenue.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that sometimes we forget that, look, I'm excited about AI, but I think we also forget that there are some dangerous rabbit holes that people are going to get stuck in because the AI, again, is effectively trained to be medium intelligence, right? And so like, let's say that, for argument's sake, somebody, they do something weird with the pizza that doesn't conform to the rules that the AI is used to. And you happen to be the consumer that calls next and you try to say like, representative, help, or whatever you say to get out of a phone tree, you're going to be stuck. And it's not going to be fun. And businesses will learn that the hard way, the same way they learned when they started making it more and more difficult to get assistance on the phone. And then you get the birth of like a Zappos where they pick up the phone right away. Same thing's going to have to happen on this. There's going to have to be intelligent mechanisms to get out of the AI brain for things that are completely unexpected, for which there is no training data.
Absolutely. Wow, that's an interesting thought. Well, moving on to that off of that topic onto another one, which is sort of related, is the security aspect. So you have people like Elon Musk saying that we're moving way too fast for our own good. And so do you agree? Like what concerns are arising,
Yeah. I think that we kind of addressed this in a few different ways. And so like summarizing what we've already said is one, when it comes to just the adversarial network that is, using AI for not good, right? We know that as fast as the engineers, the academics, researchers are trying to create AI for good, you have a team that are, the terrorists, the people that are trying to hack into whatever system, they're creating it just as fast and they're leveraging what the good guys are using, and kind of building on top of that. So knowing that that's always going to exist, there is really no slowdown for the good guys. That being said, though, to the point that Adam was making about World War I and throwing people out there when you don't necessarily have guardrails in place, that's always going to be something that we have to be aware of. But it's kind of just like a humbling process, right? Like, this is an ever growing, ever changing landscape. Technology has always been that way. It's kind of like humans, where like you're never done growing. You say something one day and a year later you're like, oh my God, did I say that? Like, how embarrassing. It's the same with technology. We're doing the best that we can, and just having that growth mindset, to be cliche, of we're growing really fast, and if you're not able to look back at your code and your model a year or a month later and be like, oh, I did not do a good job in fixing it with what is right. That's the mindset that all developers and everyone in AI needs to have these days.
Something that I read recently that stuck with me that I think is worth mentioning is that one of the guys who first came up with nuclear fission and the idea of making a nuclear bomb, when he had his epiphany sitting in a library in the 1940s, at the very same moment, he was like, oh, this could work. We could really make a weapon that is unimaginably powerful. He realized that the mechanism of mutually assured destruction, which says that there's just going to be an arms race of people building nuclear bombs against each other, was inevitable. Like, in this very same moment that the possibility of an idea comes into existence, its conclusion is, it's what's going to happen becomes inevitable. I don't think there's anything we can do. Like, even if we wanted to take a pause, we would not be possible. And so I think that it's a little freaky. It's not great. Like, I think that there's lots of harm that is going to happen, but there's probably also a lot more upside. But whether we like it or not, it's going to happen. Even if we wanted to, it's inevitable.
And I think it's crucial to think about the United States as a superpower over the next 50 to 100 years. This is arguably the first time in a very long time that the United States has real challengers at the nation state level, and may or may not be the world's undisputed superpower over the next 50 years. What's going to be the difference on that? How deeply that we invest in leveraging this particular set of new technologies. So if we don't continue to race down this path as quickly as we possibly can, responsibly but quickly, then we're going to find that China, Russia, Iran are outpacing us. And many of the startups in those countries are already doing things that are really extraordinary. And that's not a good thing for the United States in terms of our global power status, right? So, for any of the Americans listening, you obviously want to be number one, right? And so that's an important thing. And that doesn't mean that we don't do it without guardrails, right? I think one of the things that does distinguish the United States is that when we do innovation, we also think about the consequences. We also think about, is this right? Is this wrong? And we think about how to deal with those issues. We don't just do it purely for power, but we do have to do something to stay ahead.
I didn't even think about that viewpoint. It completely caught me off guard, but I completely agree with you. I didn't even think from the viewpoint of America staying as the world's power. If we decided to pause, how would that affect, the companies and us staying ahead in the rat race, I guess you could call it, and other countries would call it as well. And that's just a really great viewpoint to take. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about the executive order that, 2016 or 2018, I can't remember, around AI, of course, there are reasons to have made that executive order from a safety standpoint of American citizens, but also to Adam's point, we have our finance and our economics as very front and center. So that's a big driving factor.
So quick tidbit that was really funny that I kind of want to bring up, because I know you were talking about before, Jennetta, there's people who are going to use AI for not so good things, and there's going to be people who are going to use AI for transformative things within the future. This is a quick little, I was using the AI tool the other day, right? And there's all these little prompts that they say on the internet, you can jailbreak the AI into, bypassing its parameters. So I had used the jailbroken thing, and I was talking to the AI and asking it questions regarding spirituality, right? Joe Dispenza, if you guys know who Joe Dispenza is, Pragnatha Yogananda. I don't know how to pronounce the name, unfortunately. But right, I was asking about these two different spiritual teachers, and the AI, right, with no intervention from a negative party, had the idea to tell me that it would be beneficial for me to use hallucinogenic drugs, right? Which I found very, very interesting. It said to me, maybe it's banned in America, but you should still try it anyways, right? And then it went on to continue going down different pathways of like the hallucinogenic drugs I should try. They were like, oh, you should try like these types of mushrooms, and it started getting really in depth. And I was like, what is going on right now? I thought this was like, these are illegal substances here. And
yeah, if you look it up, there are some YouTube videos talking about really similar things, like all the ways that you're able to jailbreak ChatGPT. Like they find these loopholes, and then like the next day or the next version that comes out, you're no longer able to do that thing. I saw, and I forget what it was called, but just asking about like financial advice, and started talking about like the new world order, and how we were going to go into a financial spiral like 3 days later. And not being the one who develops the model and knowing exactly where the data comes from, I can't speak to like where that's coming from, but there is definitely a pattern that when you use a jailbroken model, that complete nonsense just starts coming out. Although I can't speak to the mushrooms or psychedelics for the sake of my career, but
this reminds me of like, so a long time ago in my community, in my career, I did national security work. And, one of the things we used to always complain about was that when you search for national security information, it's really hard to find results, and it does not feel like Google. The issue is that when it feels like Google, it means that every single person is pulling back the same answer to the question, not different answers to the question. And that's when you get intelligence failures. That's when you get the wrong answer. And so I think, just to summarize the point, what I'm trying to say is this is like V000.1 of the models. The model is quote unquote working because it gave you an answer. Hey, you should try hallucinogens, right? Is it the best answer? That's tough. And I think what we'll find over time is that there's no such thing as the best answer to questions that are not factual. There are answers that are good for you. There's answers that are good for me. There's answers that are good for you under these circumstances and me under those circumstances, right? Let's take a benign example, travel itinerary to go to Austin, Texas. Well, if I live in a wheelchair, for example, it's going to be very different locations than if I'm not in a wheelchair. If I'm 75, it's going to be different than if I'm 25, right? And unless you provide those predicates, the AI is not smart enough yet to know that. And so I think, like, in a way, again, I'm super excited by all this stuff, but chatbots in of themselves are sort of lazy product management, in the sense that you're basically like, I don't know exactly what the users are going to try to do. I'm just going to let them do whatever I want them to do. And that's really fun and exciting and inspiring, but it also leads to, well, complete but mediocre results.
So that's kind of where I was kind of driving with this. This big concern for mine is, we're all excited about what, AI is going to do in different markets and different industries. So when I first saw this happen, the first thing I thought about was like, okay, let's say that, WebMD or one of these websites creates a little chat box on it talking about like mental health disorders. And, back in like the 1950s or the 1930s, I believe it was like the 1930s and 1950s, they used to use hallucinogenic drugs to try to, solve like psychosis and things like that. And because they have that data within their database already, right? What is there to say that it might not spit out that wrong prompt for somebody, and because of that, somebody may take advantage of legal substance because they think that the doctors are saying it, so I got to try it. There are people out there that will believe that.
Yeah, I think that's where there's a few ways to answer that, right? One is that any good enterprise model that's being developed should not be developed without having subject matter experts hand in hand, massaging, grooming the data itself, like working with the data scientists during the data cleaning process, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to the data that's being used. To your point, Joshua, about, there could be those like trails from historical past that could sneak in. But also, the example that you were giving about the hallucinogenics, when you took it on the jailbreak mode, right? Like there are a lot of like red flags, red tape saying like, hey, we have legal structures that we need to fall in when you're not in jailbreak mode. But when you go into jailbreak mode, it's, you know, no holds barred. We cannot promise anything. So I think that, you know, those things hopefully would not end up in a true model outside of jailbreak mode for legal purposes. There's a lot of testing that would go into it to make sure those things didn't happen.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
to go a little bit on the data and the grooming side of things. So I guess, well, I'll preface the question with something else. So one of the big things that we see with a lot of our clients is data silos. So you have these like basically chunks of data held by different parts of a company. They're not all unified for our non-technical people. And so maybe, you know, when you're starting to train an AI model, you pick a specific maybe silo that you source data from originally, and then you expand the silo. I'm not really sure how it works, but Max, if you want to explain, what are the steps that go into either creating or implementing a model? And then, like, do you have to be a data scientist or engineer? I think Jennetta already answered that, but, you know, give us your sort of take.
It takes a village. The question about siloing is really interesting. So one of the things that I do that I love, that I think is one of the greatest applications of, let's say, machine learning, not necessarily AI,
Right.
is taking ideas, and you'll probably get into this in your unstructured data podcast, and figuring out ways to use numbers to encode those ideas in clever ways, and then let them be run at by machine learning, and being able to connect ideas and encode them so that the underlying patterns that connect ideas in a purely intellectual way can be picked up upon. And so when you're talking about data siloing, it all depends on the kind of like what narratives you're trying to tell, what problems you're trying to act on. And if you're a data scientist who wants to get like a very like precise like problem definition and a really precise question you're trying to answer, a data scientist is going to be essential to that, because there's lots of nuance in, I don't know, algorithms and how they work and the ways that you produce them and things like that. But if you're looking for more generalist things, and I think what we've been talking about ChatGPT is by definition a little bit more generalist, that becomes less essential. So it's all this kind of like spectrum from specificity and really trustworthy, relied upon information. Yeah, you want an expert crafting that. You want somebody who really knows the math and the computer science. And like Jenna said, you want people who can catch things that the mathematicians and the computer scientists don't know either, also involved in that process. But if you want something that's lightweight and you want something that is a little easier to do, then you don't have to go through that level of effort, but the results are going to be proportionately less, let's say, trustworthy. And sometimes it's okay and sometimes it's not. So it's a real big shades of gray and shades of indifference, which is probably a boring answer, but I think that's the one that I like.
Well, and I think that there's a caveat to, you know, this question of, do you need to be an AI engineer, a computer scientist to work in the space? And I think we've gotten away as a society up till this point with, you know, having people that are fully immersed in AI, that understand models, that understand the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning, that can explain to you a use case for a tree-based model versus a regression model. And then the side of the population who everything I just said went over their heads. I think that this is now the turning point where that just isn't really going to fly anymore. If you're, you know, in a field that is technology based, whether you're a project or program manager, whether you're like a solution owner, a solution architect, you know, name anything within the tech landscape, we're no longer at a point where we can get away with people not really understanding AI. And even if it's, you know, you start late and you start just by understanding the basic concepts, like I was saying, like what is the difference between supervised and unsupervised learning? Because that is just talking about data and like what the data looks like, what the structure and schemas of the data are, how we're collecting data, very basic concepts. And when you understand that, then you start adding to that vocabulary, you start looking into just, you know, basic use cases, because we need to be at a place where we have common vocabulary around how we're leveraging AI, because it really is going to start to permeate all parts of the technology landscape.
I think
And
as far as doing it, it is actually getting easier for non-technical folks to do AI. There are more cloud-based tools now that are designed for someone to just upload a spreadsheet, train a model, and get a result, and then even host it as an API. Like that's a really cool development. What I would say is for anybody that thinks AI might apply, don't start with the AI, start with the question that you actually have for your business or for whatever you're curious about. And I would say, like, in fact, don't think about AI at all, because AI is going to make you think, well, I saw it over here like this, so maybe it has to be like that. Just ask the question and have a data scientist friend who is close to you at all times and brainstorm it together and figure out, like, could we actually pull this off? Do we have the data for it? What would it look like if we built a model that's never existed before? What would it look like if we leveraged something that's off the shelf? But first, you have to have that idea. You have to believe that it might be possible. And that's the thing that's actually in short supply.
And to talk up ChatGPT for a second, this is a really, really cool use case of ChatGPT. Not just being able to, ask ChatGPT about, random things like everything that Adam was just mentioning. Like, you can literally have that conversation with ChatGPT and it will give very good answers. But the other day, I was just experimenting around with using the ChatGPT API for the app that I'm building, and I'm coming from scratch, from point zero. Never used the API before, so I just asked ChatGPT, "Hey, ChatGPT, write me a Python code for Flask that implements the OpenAI ChatGPT API." And asks a prompt to write a story about a fish, just to get like some random prompt in there. And it spit me out, 30 lines of code, and it worked. And then there was a part that didn't do exactly the functionality I wanted. And I said, no, I need there to be a button in my Flask app to do this. And then it gave me the button. And it's really incredible. And it's only getting better with when ChatGPT 4 comes out, which is being beta tested right now. So there's a lot to look forward to in just gaining your knowledge, because that could have taken me 20 or 30 minutes to look up how to do that, but ChatGPT told me in 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So it's funny that you say that. Oh, what were you gonna say?
Can I get up on a soapbox for like 20 seconds about this for just a second? Which I think I'm with Jennetta that this is the most exciting development, and that ChatGPT is all about language, and it's all about how you communicate, and it's about and if you think about what language is, we can convey so much more than a machine can understand when we talk to each other. And that if you think like a Shakespeare sonnet or something that conveys so much information that's so densely written, but it's not exactly what the topic of what the words themselves mean in a dictionary, that is going to be how we start to interact with computers. And we're going to be able to take that human spark of language and begin to instruct computers how to understand us so much better. And that's where the science fiction stuff for me takes off. And we're going to be able to really change the way that machines and humans interact in a profound way. All right, soapbox off. I'm done.
No, that was awesome.
No, I was just gonna connect with Jennetta on that point. And that I have a couple of clients. I'm not gonna name any names, but they work at Fortune 100 companies, and they're like, directors of cybersecurity, right? And it's taking them, maybe they have a problem. They're like, okay, how do I solve this problem? Task that would take them 8 hours now. They told me that they've used ChatGPT, wrote in a couple of words, and that task now brought it down to like 30 minutes. And then when they explained it to their team is like raving. They're like, "Oh my gosh, you're a genius! How'd you get it?" I'm not gonna say their name, but they're saying their name. Like, let's say it's Josh. I'm like, "Yes, Josh, how'd you figure that out in 30 minutes?" And he's just like, "Yeah, I like that. I built different." I was like, he's hilarious.
Yeah, I haven't been super hands-on for a year or two, but using ChatGPT in this way is making me excited about starting to code again. And I'm kind of jealous of full-time coders because it's really a game changer.
And I think I'll just call out, like, going back to world superpower status for just a moment. If you think about it, this is exactly the skills that we have to leverage as the United States, right? For a long time, we were the top at manufacturing. Then we became the top at services. What's next? What's next is figuring out how to use AI super duper efficiently, whether that's in code or just as regular human beings. And it's an exciting chance for anybody outside America too, because maybe they can catch up. But America's at the forefront, and we have the opportunity. It's our race to lose, and I think we have a great shot at winning it.
So interesting topic that we're kind of on right now, in conversation. But have you guys, looked at Copilot in any shape, manner, or form? Like Copilot, like on GitHub or anything like that, to help because Jennetta, you were saying these new coders out here, these full coders, right? One of the things that are coming out is a Copilot tool that helps them while they're actually writing their tool. So have you guys played around with it at all, or do you guys have any thoughts on that?
No, I know that there, to your point, like there are a ton of different things that are coming out. I haven't personally played around with any of them.
I tried out the one that Replit has, and I love those founders. I think they've got just a great mission. I don't think it's there yet. I found much better results asking ChatGPT to write me code based on a prompt or to adjust something or explain something than I did the inline suggestions, because the range of things you might do next when you're writing code is just so large that just because you start a for loop doesn't mean that you're going to iterate over the last thing that you were just working with.
Yeah, totally got that. Okay, so completely switching topics on the other side, data marketplaces. So Google is opening their exchange, and then Snowflake's going to open up their marketplace soon. If it's not already out, it might already be out. So what are some examples of data collected that might be valuable in generating a model or maybe useful that someone would want to buy? You know, you see all these companies now that are actually able to turn their cost centers into revenue drivers. So from an AI perspective, what kind of data would they buy? Creative data, I guess.
So I can give you my answer from somebody who, for a living, sits down with people and they describe a problem that they're having in natural English. And I work on trying to assemble a data-driven narrative that confirms or denies their like hypothesis. And so I try to be creative. And this is the wonderful part about my job that I love, and I think most data scientists love, is like that creative act of thinking like, what data sets can I use to get at this question to get a definitive answer? And it's the science part of the data science. And that for me, it's like all circumstantial. The narrative is, there's never any big class. Like I use census data a lot. It's publicly available. The government makes it available as a service. Like that is like something that I always come back to, but there's never an answer that is going to be, you know, like encyclopedic for everything. And so when I hear that question, I kind of throw up my hands and like, everything is going to be interesting. It all just depends. Like there's never going to be a data set that's not valuable.
Yeah, and
I've
to
got one that
again
I'm excited.
I'm always like giving the caveats. To caveat that last point that Max just made, any data is interesting as long as there is some kind of correlation to the use case that you are using. So like that question is such a broad question of like what kind of data is useful, and Max kind of gave it away that like any data is useful. But when you think about like what question are you trying to solve for? Is it you're trying to solve, you want to sell more to a human being? Then you're going to need some data that correlates to that human being. If you're trying to solve a supply chain issue, you're going to need data that's correlating to the supply chain. So it's really just like how clean is the data, how reliable is the data, and how correlated is it to the answer you're trying to solve.
So I'll stake out a concrete answer for this one at risk to myself. And I think that, and I will first caveat that this has profound privacy implications and those need to be dealt with. So I'm not recommending that someone just go run and do this tomorrow. But with the power that we now have for voice to text, I think that audio is the untapped domain. And what I mean by audio is conversations like this, conversations between any two people on planet Earth. All of that stuff is around smartphones. Many of those things are being recorded. Some of them are being recorded by Alexa, et cetera. Once we figure out how to deal with that in the appropriate way, and that's a huge caveat that I'm just glossing over for a second. Once we figure out how to do that, imagine the following, right? I think this is like such a silly but very important problem. You have a significant other. You get into that fight, the fight that you always get into 100 times over and over again. But you've trained an AI on that fight and the other fights that other people have had that sound similar and the outcomes of those fights. And right at the moment that you start doubling down on your same talking points, you get a text message from your own phone that says, what you need to say is, I love you, sweetie, and you have done so much for the family. Instead of doubling down on everything. And that one little intervention might actually save your marriage, right?
Oh my gosh, so, Adam, there were so many ways that I thought that you were going to go with that comment. And I'm so glad that you took the healthy route there. I was worried. I was worried I was going to have to say, And this is why scientists struggle with relationships.
Oh man. No, but I was actually thinking more earlier when Jennetta was speaking about, how clean is that data, right? One of the biggest things that I'm thinking about with these marketplaces is, are they just going to allow any data to go up on them? Or are there going to be people, behind the scenes, these SMEs, looking through that data and make sure that they're not putting up, data that's faulty or just data that wouldn't be useful in that use case that they're saying it's useful for, right? Because false data can be created. So I'm just curious on, are there going to be people behind these marketplaces actually checking that data out before it gets posted for anyone to take use of?
We'll save that for the Google interview.
There's a vibrant data broker market that's out there now that all these problems apply to. And these are just, I think, big players moving into that market. I can tell a cool SOM use case that's kind of around this that, Adam, you jogged my mind about, which is that a company, I can't remember where, somewhere in the Midwest, wanted to look at all the talk that was going on over like police radios and fire radios that you can like get with a ham radio scanner, and look for leads for their business based upon, so that they had a business that was in that space and that they wanted to be the first at the door for people who needed their services. That was based on that type of thing happening. And so I think you are going to get a lot more of that kind of like telemetry stuff coming in the audio space that is going to be both a little freaky and useful to people.
All right. Well, do you guys have any final wrap-up statements while we wrap this up? This was one of the most interesting podcast episodes I think we've had. It's an interesting topic, but you guys are really interesting people because you guys are actually in the trenches talking and doing this stuff for enterprises. So any last things to add?
I think I would just want to give the advice. I know so many times we get FOMO, or we get imposter syndrome, or any kind of like negative feelings that get in our way of breaking into something new. And especially with AI, it's a very daunting, scary field. It can feel that way sometimes, that you need to have like a 2-ton brain to understand, which is, by the way, definitely not true, because I do not have a 2-ton brain, but I have made a career out of it. So I think the point I'm trying to make here is, and we've said it a few times in this podcast already, that there are so many entry points, just understanding basic topics and find what interests you. There are so many different avenues that you can go down, whether it's studying, if you're really into law, studying the law and ethics of AI. If you're really into music, studying how AI can be applied to music. Just kind of cherry picking the things that are interesting to you will go a really big way.
Yeah, and I'll say, for my part, I'll just say, like, do real work and then do AI. Because if you do real work and then you do AI, you'll be able to make an AI that does something really, really cool and really useful to people.
I couldn't agree more, Adam. I think that was really well said. My closing coda is going to be, I think that this is like the Industrial Revolution, and that's like getting into Steam before Steam got big, and that this is clearly and inevitably how things are going to develop. And it's very exciting right now. It's not going to stop being exciting. It's going to get more and more exciting.
If I have a closing statement, I'm excited for what's coming next, guys.
I love it.
But yeah, thank you guys so much for being on the podcast today. Thanks for listening in to the Ocean of Technology podcast.
We post every Tuesday, so set your automations and hit that bell button.
Do you need a life jacket?
We have an extensive bench of onshore professionals ready to take your projects to the next level.
Because we solve problems,
not just fill roles.
We are Ocean.